Welcome to the Gnostic Informant. I'm Jesus, the Logos incarnate, and you are about to attain true Gnosis.
And welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true Gnosis. And I'm with Derek Lambert from Mythivision podcast today, just having a hangout, checking out the chat, see what everyone's up to today. Just wanted to go live, haven't been live in a while. But I want to start off talking about mythicism a little bit. It's a hot topic on both of our channels.
Dude, you're not kidding.
We both went through the same path, as in and I think this might be a normal path for some people. So if you're in the chat and you think this, you agree with this, let me know. But this is what happens. You go into fundamentalism Christianity. You think everything in the Bible is true. It's all 100% factual, historical. And then you start to actually look at it critically. Mm-hmm. And once you start doing that, you see hardly any of it's true. It's all basically mythology.
I think there's a process that I think you skipped. Just to point out, I just want to emphasize, and you tell me if I'm right. It wasn't that you went from it's all 100% absolutely true to I'm being critical and I'm throwing it out. It was like, maybe I don't understand what it really meant. And you go through this phase of there's secret meanings and it's really astrology and it's this and it's that. Right. And there's all these codes and it's like, no, God's even more complex and much deeper than that. And you go through this almost hippie-ish interpretation stage, if that makes sense.
That's a good point, dude. Because you almost have to you get to this point where you think there's still something about it that it has to be masterfully done. So there has to be some sort of conspiracy behind it. It has to mean something. There has to be something going on. It's still profound to me because I felt it, right? So then you start going into pantheism or Gnosticism or all these different outlooks, algorizing everything, like you said, astrotheology, and then you start putting all these pieces together. You start getting into Roman providence and all these. There's truth to all these. There's truth to everything I'm saying.
Right. There's something.
I wouldn't go full blown in any of those areas, but there's a little bit of truth in all these areas. But then you start to see then you get to this final stage where you think, what if it's all myth? And then you're like, okay, so how much of this Jesus character do we know from history?
I don't know if that's a final stage, but I get what you're saying along this road because it's
what I'm saying, when final stage as in how you get into mythicism.
Right. Okay.
So what happens is some people stay here. I didn't stay here, but what happens is you end up saying, let me just speak for myself. I ended up saying, okay, what do we know about this guy? Has he written anything down? Does anybody around him? Does he have any parents or brothers or sisters that wrote anything down? Is there any stones, inscriptions? None. Zero. Everything's written about him a generation later.
Exactly.
So then you start to wonder, does he even exist? And it's just
Right.
it's a natural.
Bro, there's nothing wrong with thinking that way at all. I mean, bro, like that perfectly well said. And then when you look at the things that are supposedly mentioning him, they're not clear, or there's something suspect, or there's a problem. The testimony in Flavianum, for example, like it's only one dude I've ever run into, Dr. Samuel Zenner, who tried that I'm aware of, that's somewhat contemporary here, that is making the claim that it was not interpolated at all. He claims it is authentic as it is. So he thinks Josephus, in some sense, was a follower or at least agreed with this character, Jesus. But mind you, it would probably be more in the Jewish kind of understanding of Jesus, not in the what we think of as in Christian, maybe a bit anachronistic. But yeah, like most people see, what the heck is going on? So when we start quoting things that are extra biblical to try and assume here's a guy, like there is some things that can explain that away. You could try to say, look, they are aware of what Christians are saying about their guy, and therefore they're getting already propaganda of Jesus being spread by Christian messages. So this is where the historians getting their ideas from. Tacitus, for example, or you see where I'm going. A Suetonius is probably aware of Tacitus. So here you have this dilemma where you're like, this guy, we're trying to find his fingerprints. If he was God, right? This guy was God.
Right.
He was God, Neal. And now he's a vapor that you can't even find. And you're wondering, like, I mean, like, when we're looking at the text, we know there's mythology there at this point. We already discovered there's problems to see, yeah, this is suspect. We're already finding things in parallels, if you will, in the world, not saying Xerox, Zeitgeist Xerox copies, but there's definite virgin births that go back hundreds of years before Jesus and contemporaneous. And you go, dude, that didn't happen. So when you see that happen over and over, that didn't happen. That's probably not true. What is, it's easy to go and just go, the guy probably did not exist. But we usually didn't say that. Like for me, it was like, man, Jesus couldn't have existed. For a minute, I kind of went all the way and was just like, he can't. There's no way. And you know what? There's some truth to that as well.
Right. And here's the thing. When you look at the passages in all the Gospels, not talking about Paul, I'm talking about the Gospels, the stories that are written about him, you start to see that a lot of it is a retelling of Joseph, for example, being sold for 20 shekels, Jesus being sold, or not even just from the Old Testament. You see things from the Greek world being retold as Jesus. And when you take all of that away, when you subtract all the stuff that you notice that's retold, what are you left with? You're left with a guy named Jesus from Nazareth, who has a mother named Mary, who was crucified. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's the skeleton story that we know. That's Jesus of Nazareth. Right. I mean, there might be a couple of extra details, but I'm saying for the most part, that's what Josephus gives us. That's all we really got. Other than that, it's pretty much stories attributed.
He's just another Galilean Jew, right? According to, when you strip away the mythology, right? You have a Galilean Jew who must have made an impact on a small cult of people. And he was saying some wonderful things to their ears. And for whatever reason, this movement did not go extinct, even in the accounts of Acts, right? Which are late. I'm just going with critical scholarship. Just like our dear friend Richard Carrier, when he wrote On the Historicity, he spent like multiple chapters out the gate just saying, let me go ahead and make this clear. I'm not even engaging with like the Christian fundamentalist world. I'm assuming we're critical scholars here investigating the claim, which I appreciated, because then you cut out all the fluff. You know, you're dealing with straight up, all right, what is the evidence actually saying instead of the propaganda?
Let's be grown-ups here.
Let's be grown-ups at this point. We're done playing the game of, oh, well, there was an empty tomb and did he rise or not? Like, come on, guys. Like, was there a tomb, right? These are valid questions to ask.
Really, that is a valid question.
We're beyond did he rise. At this point, we're thinking, well, what could be history? What is myth? And some go to the full myth side, and you can't blame people.
No.
You can't blame people for doing that.
Especially when you look at how well documented this period was. You have Pliny the Elder traveling around Judea in the city of Caesarea, in the city of, he's all over. He's talking to the Essenes. You got Philo Judaeus. He's writing in the 40s and the 30s about the Son of God, about the Messiah, about the Logos. all the same concept. He's looking for the Messiah.
Yeah.
You got all these other. You got Seneca. You got all these first century writers, and they don't know who he is yet. So I'm not. That doesn't. So
Yeah,
my untrained, non-scholarly mind, when I find out this information, my mind is he can't exist because they would have wrote his name down. That's what I first thought. Yeah. And that is actually is legit first reaction to all of these historians not mentioning Jesus' name. But what I learned was, and now I'm starting to flip over to how I got out of the. It's not that I don't think mythicism credible anymore. I started listening to people who are really trained, who went to school for 8 years, 10 years, 12 years
on a specific.
Yeah, who have PhDs in New Testament studies and criticals, all this stuff, and it's like there's other people. This is what Bart Ehrman told me. It's not just other people from that time period who we know lived. Simon of Perea, for example, Judas the Galilean. Did the historians write about those guys? No, we didn't. We have to wait till later on for people to remember those names, get put in the Talmud and stuff like that. That's a good point. I'm like, well, Jesus is a little bit different. I mean, this guy. They claim that he rose from this.
Right.
You would think this guy would be all over the place because of all this stuff, but this could be a thing where he progressively gets more and more godly. He goes from a guy who died to all of a sudden, oh, the temple did fall. He predicted that. And then all of a sudden, all these myths get written about him. Like, there could have been a progression there.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what Bart Ehrman's How Jesus Became God book exactly. Yeah. That the whole thing's about. He does a series as well. And if anybody's interested in Audible, listening to his Yale series on this, he gives a lecture, 10-part lecture, explaining the development of demigods in the Greco-Roman world and how he went from a demigod and then evolves through the gospel narratives to where he's like pre-existent deity. Right. Okay. Now I know someone might go, but Paul thought in his Philippians hymn that he was pre-existent. But I also know if you listen to James Tabor, he talks about that isn't a pre-existent hymn, but this is a hymn about him doing what Adam, the first Adam, didn't do. And so he does think that Jesus had an apotheosis.
Yeah.
This is strange because if you go in Josephus talks about how Moses never died. What? In the Tanakh, yes, he did, right? It talks about how he dies, he goes off, he couldn't enter the promised land, he dies.
Yeah, he's told that you're never going to go there.
He does not die. To Josephus, Josephus says he had an apotheosis and was ascended on high. So when you read that, you go, hold on, it wasn't just him. But you think in the Gospels, right? Here is Moses and here is Elijah at this transfiguration scene. And you go, hold on, is the Gospels also in the same vein as Josephus on this thought? Like, you kind of wonder. Here is this apotheosis of Jesus. Some want to say it's they want to argue for a different argument on what's happening in this transfiguration. I'm convinced that this is an apotheosis. There's a great article online showing how this is a deification, a kind of a hint of what's going to happen at the resurrection with Jesus before it happens, but shh, don't go telling anybody.
Right.
Why not? Don't you want everybody to know the truth? Not so much in Mark. And then weird things happen in Matthew and Luke. Everything's a little different, but an apotheosis. So Paul believes an apotheosis is happening. So here's my question. Here's a Galilean Jew in the Middle East, right? In an area that is maybe somewhat documented, but very few, if anybody, is literate, as Bart Ehrman talks about in this region. There's not a lot of that happening here. If he gets a mention, we're looking at the New Testament that's highly theological. We have a hard time trusting, right? This is one of the reasons we became mythicists to begin with. He, I think, does get a mention in Josephus. But let's just pretend, for those who are skeptical of that to begin with, is John the Baptist a real man? And I know mythicists who went so far to say John the Baptist didn't exist. They want to argue he didn't exist.
I think he's more easier to find in history than Jesus.
How? He gets one mention in Josephus. And there are people who want to try and yes, one mention in Josephus, bro. I mean, it's this little paragraph.
If I'm not mistaken, isn't his tomb located too?
I'm not certain that his tomb is located, but I wouldn't be shocked if someone venerated something saying this is the tomb of.
That's true. I'm not forgetting about. There are people who say that's David's tomb.
The Christian church has like multiple nativity scenes for Jesus. Like, so what? Doesn't mean he existed. But he gets a mention in Josephus, a passing mention about how he ends up getting killed because I think he called out. What was it? He called out someone or something. There was some infidelity in a marriage or something happened. I can't remember, but they killed him. And they didn't kill him in the region because they were afraid of the revolt. So they took him out somewhere in the desert where they could kill him and imprison him. So they didn't end up getting, in trouble.
Yeah.
My point is, you look at, like we just did our video, and the one that you're editing now, which we've collabed on Augustus Caesar, he has an apotheosis. He has prophecies of his birth. He has all these things. And we have this document.
All the same boxes checked of what a Messiah figure is supposed to look like.
Right.
Not just in Judaism, it's all over the place.
Right.
There's this, it's like a superhero in Marvel or DC. They have to have certain things. They have to have a costume. They have to have some weird story of how they got their powers. They have to have an arch nemesis. All those things, but they're all different. Spider-Man doesn't look like Batman. He's red. This one's black. They're all different in their like attributes, but they're similar when you take a step back, look at the macro of the whole thing. That's how we compare these Messiah-like, Savior-like figures, which, by the way, if you look at Alexander the Great or the Diadachi Wars, there's so many Soters. Seleucus the Soter, Antiochus the Soter, Ptolemy the Soter. They're all saviors. And by the way, I just found this out. I was just reading Diodorus Sicily, and when Demetrius, who was the son of Antigonus, died, he was Demetrius Soter. They built a tomb for him with a temple that says the Soter, the savior. That's what he was. That's what he was worshipped as a god.
Well, we know that guy's the real one, though.
It's like, why isn't he the real one? There were people being worshipped as the savior, and the name Demetrius in Greek means Demeter's son. Demetri Eos, Demeter's son. So a guy named Demeter's son is worshipped as the savior.
Yeah, and these are people that we would say existed, and then it goes on when you look at like Augustus Caesar. Here, his name was not Augustus, Octavian, but he was given the name Augustus, Julius Caesar. And here is this guy who claims to be a descendant, in line with Romulus, who claimed to be a descendant. If I'm not mistaken, it was Venus.
Yeah.
And not only that, Alexander the Great also, who was born of a virgin priestess.
They do the same thing that Luke and Matthew are doing. They make these elaborate genealogies that probably aren't real. But they just do it to like, he's the son of Alexander through his mother, and through his father, he's the son of Venus. And this is
invented genealogy. And so what?
Right.
So while this can be evidence for someone who's a mythicist, I think I get the gist you're going with the show is just to kind of like wrestle with the ideas of what makes us think the way we do, what makes us tick, Right. For me, if there was more literature, I'm throwing this out there for the mythicist, my friends. If there was more literature of this whole celestial sphere, crucifixion in the heavens, demons up in the sky, fighting and literally killing and crucifying people up there, instead of Josephus, real historians, Philo, real historians who actually talk about real people being actually crucified, Jews who are actually out here trying to cleanse temples and get killed for it and stuff like that, like Judas the Galilean and others that he got in prison. For me, I'm saying if there was a lot more of that whole weird wonky stuff in the heavens and not just like the ascension of Isaiah or something, I would be like, yo, this seems to me to be more plausible.
Right.
But I don't find that. The most you get, in my opinion, unless you interpret Paul's Philippians hymn in that direct pre-existent argument, which Christians want to do it for certain reasons, but mythicists also, they seem to have that kind of view too, because if he's not pre-existent in Paul, then how's he an angelic celestial figure pre his coming to birth? Paul says he was born of the flesh, born of a woman, right? Well, they'll argue over that Greek term and say it means manufactured. And this is where like most Greek scholars will interpret that particular thing and say, born of a woman. Like this, just he's mortal is the point. He's mortal, but he becomes immortal. And that's the whole point, So I don't see personally like how he's mortal in the third heaven. It's hard for me to get the idea that like he comes down to a certain point in heaven. He's like from the sperm bank of David, like God like collected David's seed and somehow made him manufacture Jesus in heaven. That seems, and I'm just being honest, more ad hoc. There's a lot more moving parts, and I just don't see all of the data that tells me that. You can run to Enoch. You can run to other areas to try to piece this thing together. And I'm not knocking you for it. Right. Just for me, seems there was a guy who, just like Augustus Caesar, is deified, apotheosis, everything. The guy's like doing miracles. I mean, Augustus had eagle fly down, steal the bread out of his hand, realized who this guy was as a child, flies back and like softly places the bread back in his hand, because one day that same eagle is going to come back and take him off into Mount Olympus, where he's going to be deified into the heavens.
Right.
What? This is a guy we know really existed. So,
and you know what? James Tabor comes to mind for right now. But not just him, but when we talk about the Talmud, which was written way later, well, it wasn't actually written way later. It was put together way later. It was compiled. These are sources from earlier. A lot of them are some of them are first century sources, early second century sources, like in the not the Mishnah, maybe it is the Mishnah, but whatever. Part of the Talmud is from sources that are early. Mm-hmm. And you would think if Jesus was a myth, you would think there would be something in there contesting this guy. No one knows who Jesus is. Where did he come from? Who knows? Why? No one knows. You don't see any of that. There's no contesting of his historicity. Right. I think that's a really good point. And also the Bethlehem and Nazareth thing. I know Hitchens is credited for this, but this is a good point. And I know a lot of mythicists will say, well, it's the branch, the Netzar. The word branch is Netzar in Hebrew. So he's from the Netzar. He's from the branch. It's like, okay, that's sort of, it's like, I guess you could be right, but it's like, it's really a stretch. Like, you're really stretching to make that work. And there's no other evidence. There's no other scripture that's like, he will come from Nazareth. Like, if you had that, then maybe I would still be a mythicist. But then the fact that you have a guy who's born in Nazareth and the Messiah is supposed to be the son of David in Bethlehem. Right. You can see where there's a conflict and they're trying to make it work.
It's same thing with John the Baptist baptizing Jesus and Mark. Because you were being baptized for the forgiveness of sins. And not only were you being baptized for the forgiveness of sins, which he's supposed to be the one who comes to take away everybody's sins. So is he sinless or not? But the other point is that you're a subordinate. If you're baptized by someone, they're your leader in history. This is historical. So Mark either didn't care and didn't see a problem with this because his demigod Jesus could have done anything and been subordinate to any human figure on earth. But Matthew might have had a higher Christology and is already going, we can't have that. That makes Jesus like not as high on the totem pole that we want him on. So we can't, or is it John? I can't remember where it is. Matthew has him born Son of God. So forgive me. He goes back to a birth instead of him being Son of God and like declared, this is my son at his baptism. And early church Christians believed in that whole, he became Son of God at baptism. This is the idea. So it's like, what the heck?
And the last reason why I'm not a mythicist, and I think the biggest question for mythicists is if they're willing to interpolate in Josephus, in the Antiquities book 18, the Testimonium Flavianum, and then later on in the book 20 or whatever it is at the end where you talk about James being the brother. Why wouldn't they keep going? Why wouldn't they do other stuff? But why wouldn't they write elaborate? Like, they could have really went and made it more believable than just a couple texts, couple lines here and there, which makes me think that they're actually and Mason pointed this out to me, is that when you look at the Testimonium Flavianum, it actually does fit really well. I used to be one of the people who say it's in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't even make sense. If you take it out, the text still makes sense without it, which is true. But Josephus is talking about Pilate already. Already in the subject of Pilate. It's already in the subject of shit that Pilate did to the Jews, and the crucifixion's one of them. So that kind of does fit. Right. So and then finally, the last thing I'm going to say, I'm going to go to super chats now, unless you want.
No, feel free.
The final thing is this: for example, in football, I don't know if you're a football fan or not. When there's a penalty, or when there's a penalty, when there's a touchdown that gets challenged by the other coach, there has to be enough evidence to overturn the play. So in the situation, I'm totally using a weird analogy, but think about this: in the situation of Jesus, is it possible that he could be a myth? Yeah, 100% possible. Of course. But is there enough to overturn and say that I can prove definitely that he doesn't exist? No,
and vice versa. Right.
Which means, and then the final thing is this: it's like a Pythagoras or other people in history who might not have existed, but their ideas actually make them real. Jesus becomes that. So even if the mythicists are right, at the end of the day, there is now a Jesus of Nazareth, whether we like it or not.
Two things. I just wanted to find something for our audience. When you said myth, you mean complete myth. Not that there is a mythicizing going on or a mythologizing going on. And then number two is, I think we both agree that Jesus, the mythology, doesn't exist. Just like that Augustus Caesar, okay, that is described in Suetonius' Lives of the Caesars. That Suetonius, that Augustus is myth, meaning that Augustus described from there were omens before he was born, and then the star rose, literally a star rose from the place he was being conceived in the bed with his mother, who had a serpent that slid in, which was a god, and the father knew not to lay with. Like, bro, it's like real. What is going on? This is almost like somebody read somebody, or somebody knows something from the same sources, and so we know that didn't happen. So we're in agreement. So while everyone gets, don't get all caught up in no, I can't believe you don't see the truth. Dude, the truth on this matter, I don't think can be absolutely solved either way. But there are reasons to lean in directions depending on what you're looking at and how you favor those particular interpretations of the evidence. And for me, it's much simpler. The historical position being mythologized for me is a lot easier. It's all around simpler for me.
And it's not that important to a lot of mythicists, and I'm not saying that a lot of them do this, but just a few maybe. It's important to them that he has to be a myth, or else, well, I don't know. It's like a big deal if he's not. Like, mad.
If you're saying there might have been a guy, you might be an apologist,
right? If he existed, so what? What does that matter?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like he doesn't have to be a myth.
It doesn't matter at the end of the day. Yeah,
I don't know,
because all we have at this point is a theology, a Christology. We have a mythologized Jesus. You have to cut away. You have to Thomas Jefferson the text, and even then, right? Historicists can't agree on what is really what the guy did or didn't do or who. And you know what? While mythicists love to point that out, and they're right, historicists can't figure it out. Just read the newest varieties of Jesus mythicism. Check out in the beginning. This is the latest, greatest right now on mythicism. I have the book here. John Loftus is the author here, edited, if you will, at least, and co-authored with Robert Price. If you read the various forms of mythicism, they can't even agree. Is it a Roman provenance? Right. Is it complete astrotheology? Is Jesus a mushroom? M. Allegra's in here. Like, I'm not even kidding you. Michael Lockwood, Joseph Atwell, of course, Bill Darlison, he does the astrotheology stuff, Earl Doherty, Stephen Holler. And these are just some of the top. There are other mythicists out there. They can't agree on what is, what isn't, and anyway.
Yeah, I think Carrier is the most convincing.
If you're going to go, like, I'm with you. If you're going to go with someone.
I got his book on the historicity of Jesus. And when I read that book, when I first got that book, I was convinced that there was no guy. Like, he had before.
Right. Well, I was too.
But like I said, I got to the point where I said, okay, I can't answer the Nazareth thing, and also I don't have enough to be. I'm not an expert, first of all, so I have to go with the scholars tell me, and I don't see enough for me to go against what the consensus is. And I know the consensus are mostly Christians. I hear that, but there's a lot of them that aren't Christians, and they're not just going to go with the flow. There's a lot of scholars that have a lot of really interesting positions. I don't want to say fringe, but like, they go against the grain in a lot of areas, but they're not mythicists, and they would be if they felt that way.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. They're not being forced to think that.
Yeah, the evidence, like I said, what are you looking at and what are you favoring? Because this is what my journey over the past 2.5 years on mythvision is. And in fact, I should probably publish a book at some point about how I've understood the scholars. I've had so many, and why they take paths they do, and why interpretations go in the paths they do, and what the conclusions seem to be and why. And I'm telling you, the reason we're having these conversations and why there are people super chatting right now, and people who are probably going, Derek, and then people who are going, Derek, and then people are going, Neal, and people are going, Neal, is because the data is so all over the place.
Yeah.
It is a jigsaw puzzle, and what pieces you seem to want to favor as evidence, those are the things that become relevant. And I mean, dude, for me, I just came to the conclusion, I'm like, probably a guy.
Yep.
So damn what?
Yeah.
He didn't have magical powers. Okay. He was probably very enthusiastic, charismatic to his little inner cult. And here's this guy, Paul. I liked the other day the interview I did with Jennifer Burden. You had a wonderful interview with her as well. She said, this guy was persecuting them. He was against the Jesus movement. And then all of a sudden he flips. Like, if anyone made it something that became, I think, more popular, it is when it was able to hit a world, a Hellenistic world, whether Jewish or non-Jewish, doesn't matter. Most likely, I would say in the Gentile world, it starts to take off, which is where we start seeing the wild Gnostic things start happening out of Paul, I think. Things like this. That's when I think it starts to become kind of a thing. Yeah. And it takes time for it to be a thing. So while most legends that we're reading about, from Asclepius and Hercules and even what we're reading in Jewish literature from Enoch, most of these figures are like pre-Diluvian. Like Enoch was before the flood, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we're talking about a guy, when you're writing about Enoch acting like you're Enoch in one Enoch, and you're writing the stuff in the second, 3rd century BC, and Enoch supposedly lived, I don't know, 1,000 to 2,000 years before that, right? You're maybe 2,000 to 3,000 years before that. That is where we know this figure most likely did not exist at all. Like, there probably wasn't even a kernel. But when you have a guy supposedly, living 40 to 100 years before the time you're writing, like, most of the time, the legends, Zalmoxis and other things, are written so much later that you kind of go, even then, right? Herodotus thought he was a guy. So, why would you? I know what Carrier does. He goes to the cargo cults and he shows within decades. It didn't take long before John Frum became a real historical guy, but he really wasn't a guy. And that's possible. Is that the most probable thing that happens, is people write mythical figures in recent history in that same way? Possible.
Right.
In his book, he talks about, who's the cook lady that he talks about in this book. He says she has an address. She's been in commercials. And come to find out, I can't remember her name in his book on the historicity. She never existed, but we act like she did. And she's just kind of a emblem or figure. Anyway, get into these super chats, bro. We could go on and on about this stuff.
Yeah, just a precursor before we do these super chats. Just remember, we're not experts, but we're going to do our best. And if not, we might refer you to someone who knows. So but that, just want to throw that out there so nobody's like,
oh, no, I know everything, bro.
Who do these guys think they are? They don't have any PhDs.
Just kidding.
Like, yeah, you guys are right. We don't have any PhDs, but we're just having fun.
We're having fun. Yeah.
So anyways, Gaius Julius Windex, one of my Patreon members, thank you for the super chat. What are your thoughts on Pantera as the father? You could go first.
Okay, so here's honest. I hear a case, that famous proverb in the Bible where a man makes a case and another one comes in. I've said this recently, and they make a case, and the first guy, you're like, I'm convinced. Then the next guy comes in, and you're like, I don't know. I don't know. Okay, I would rather remain completely agnostic on this. I have a tendency, when I see the birth narratives in the Gospels, I have a tendency to look at other, like when we look at Alexander the Great's birth from a priestess who's a virgin and she conceives a demigod who becomes a divine figure at his apotheosis, Alexander the Great, right? I think that makes more sense for why she's a virgin, but it's possible that there is another angle to this, that Panthera was a Roman soldier who might have even been a Jewish boy, a slave that became a Roman soldier, earned his freedom after being in for 40-something years. It's an interesting thing. It's almost like if it is true, it's an amazing mythical historical event. It almost sounds like that. Like, what the freak happened here? And I don't know.
And I want to refer you to James Tabor on this subject, because he knows everything about this subject. I did a video with him on this subject. It's in my videos section. You'll find it, and it's.
He's not dogmatic either, though.
No. And that's the thing. But he lets you know that there are sources, not just in what's his name? Who's the guy? The pagan writer who writes about
Celsus. Yeah, Celsus. not just later on 3rd century. Yeah.
Right, but Celsus says that he gets it from Jewish sources, and then the sources in the Talmud are referring to people in the 1st century who are talking about this.
Well, it wasn't just that. The Tosefta, I think, mentions something.
That's what he says. Yeah. And it says a guy named Jacob who's healing in the name of Jesus Pantera, and they're giving positive information. It's like, whoa, there might be something going on here. But like you said, I agree. I don't know, but it is interesting, and it's very possible too. Like, if we're all going to be honest here, he has a father, right? If he's a real person, if he's a historical person, he has a father. Somebody's his father, and this is like the best lead we got.
Well, the other lead, is Joseph.
But when do you first hear about him in history? In the gospel?
I mean, that's it. He disappears.
Paul. He's not even Mark.
Luke doesn't give a crap about the guy.
Right.
I mean, like, he doesn't even pop up. So
he's not mentioned until like this late 70s. Like, no one mentions him at all.
There is a mention I think in the Gospel of John, might be holding on to some tradition, maybe, of the idea that he was born of fornication, that Mary fornicated to have Jesus. And, we know the kind of sins that Jesus, his mother birthed him. And you kind of wonder, I don't know, I'm in speculation land, but do you ever wonder if the woman caught in adultery is kind of another way of saying, forgive my mother?
Right. Like,
you know what I mean? Like
someone who grew up with someone that went through that.
Yeah. Like, hey, my mom got accused this her whole life. We need to put this in the mouth of the Lord himself to
Exactly.
You never know.
It makes sense that way. That is a really good point.
I mean, dude, I'm so on speculation land there. So please, I don't know.
So anyways, next one is from Imposter Sir Spence. Thank you for the super chat. He says, could Jesus be based off Simon of Perez? I think he meant Perea, and Judas of Galilee. Those are if anyone doesn't know who this is, these are the two other wannabe messiahs from the first century. And I think there's more than two, but these are two of them, right?
Yeah.
So but Judas of Galilee is interesting because he's from the Galilee, and if you Josephus writes about him, and he's actually like a former what do you call it? What's that judicial branch? What do they call the judges in Israel? I can't remember what they're called, but it starts with the S. The Sanhedrin.
Okay.
He was a former Sanhedrin representing the Essenes, and he quit and went out and became a Messiah, proclaimed himself as Messiah. So that's interesting that he sort of was in the government, and then he leaves, and he's like anti-government. I don't know much about Simon of Perea off the top of my head, but another guy who claimed to be the Messiah and was killed. I know he was killed in some weird wilderness area in between two rocks or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but I think it's interesting. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, Judas the Galilean. There's a book called it's actually, he calls it Judas of Nazareth. There's multiple books by the gentleman. I have a couple of them here. I read them a long time ago, back when I was reading Ralph Ellis and Atwell and all these guys before. Mark Unterbrink has a hypothesis that he thinks that, and I just remember that, but dude, trying to find the book on that shelf would be like torture. I tried looking for a couple books before we did the show, and I was like, I'm just not. It's dark out here in the garage, and anyway, in the office. Yeah. But he makes this case that he sees a lot of parallels between Judas the Galilean and Jesus, but most notably is the imprisonment for cleansing the temple, or the attempt to cleanse the temple. And there are serious scholars who think that in the Gospels, the reason Jesus is actually being crucified and killed is for an insurrection act. He's not just saying, I'm the king of the Jews. Like, this is obviously, just that alone would probably get him stoned or killed or whatever. But the fact that he would have made an attempt to do this would have absolutely condemned him to death. So this could be a kernel that him cleansing the temple might be a reality of a Jew who did this. And is this Judas the Galilean doing this? Well, if one guy really did try to do this, is it implausible to think another guy tried to do this? It's not implausible. It's almost like saying, when people talk about Jesus predicting the destruction of the temple, or that there's something wrong with the temple and it's probably going to come down because it's corrupt and its leaders are corrupt, right? The Essenes, the Qumran community, thought the same thing. They're like, you know what? We're cool out here in the diaspora. We don't need to be in that temple. They're corrupt. They don't even follow the correct calendar, solar instead of lunar, all this stuff, right? So you think to yourself, okay, is it implausible that a temple would be destroyed in light of it's been destroyed before? I mean, how improbable is it that a temple would be destroyed if they think they're under God's judgment because they're not obeying the correct calendar and they're not doing the right thing? So if a guy said that, and then next thing you know, a temple does fall,
they're going to start writing myths about him.
He's the man. Right. Yeah, dude.
And I wouldn't be surprised if they attributed some of the sayings or ideas from these other messiahs.
Could be. Could be a trope, could be a theme. And could Judas, I don't know about Simon of Perea, but I do think it's possible that Judas the Galilean played a role, just like it's possible that having a guy on each side of Jesus being crucified could have come from the biography of Josephus, that there is two, he had 3 friends. 2 of them died, 1 survived. Could be. But then this gets into the open tomb book that talks about Jesus didn't really ever die, the swoon theory. So there's all sorts of stuff that...
It's all interesting, though. But yeah,
it's interesting, but I'm just not convinced.
Melody Joy, great friend of both of us, thank you for the super chat, says, thoughts on Tabor and finding Jesus' family tomb?
You want me to go first?
You go first.
Okay, so first of all, I think Tabor is a god.
He's
Tabor
one of the best scholars alive.
He'll tell you when he isn't sure, and even when he's sure, he's like, "But I could be wrong." Like this is a
question, and he'll go on for 2 hours answering it. Like he just keeps going. Like
a lovely human. I mean, if that is your point, I think she's trying to connect that to the second part, but I had to emphasize the first part of this question here. And Melody, thank you for being a member of my channel and Nils and the super chat. So thank you so much. Thoughts on Tabor and finding Jesus' tomb? I'll be honest with you. I don't even know. I haven't. So Tabor even told me, he's like, I don't even want you to make an opinion. I don't want you to make any judgment. I want you to look at the data. I'm going to send you everything there is on this so you can make a judgment for yourself and consider the archaeological data, go from there. And, was this Jesus in this tomb too? There's a lot of questions. I would say I'm not sure, and I don't buy into anything till I know.
I will say this, though. If anybody, I don't care who you are, if you come across a tomb that has all these names like Jesus and Mary and Joseph and James, you're going to think about this. And is this it? Is this the guy?
Right.
Like who wouldn't? That's a natural response to finding a tomb that's so close to the Jesus family. Why wouldn't you want to go down that path and explore it and try to see if this is the real deal? I see there's no fault in that whatsoever. We're
going to be seeing the Tophet tomb in October when we're in Israel, and we will have our cameras rolled. So there will be a
8K.
Yeah, we're going to have awesome. We're going to be putting together a series for Dr. Tabor, and he's been to Israel 72, 73 times. And he said we're also going to, people been wishing this. Christians been wishing we ended up in Gehenna, and guess what? We're actually going to visit it too when we get there. So, yeah.
I'm also going to be turning 33 years old while we're there.
And I will be 33. No, I'll be 34 by the time we're there, actually.
So it's funny because I'll be able to say I turned 33 in Jerusalem, just so did Jesus of Nazareth.
We ought to buy you a red, scarlet robe or something and put you out.
Right. I think I just passed one. I'm looking for the next one. I think I passed one. Okay.
I hope what we answered it. The ultimate conclusion to Melodies, and while you're looking for that, is simply I don't have any thoughts. I know that a lot of people are skeptical of it, and I don't blame them. And I know that Tabor says there is good reason to really consider the case and not just, but I think where the real suspicion for a lot of them, they would suggest, is they'll try to say, well, look who's involved, the naked archaeologist. So they'll go, he runs down these rabbit holes of conspiracy theories, and they'll say, well, we're not, buying into that and things like that. There's a lot of people out there that have these kind of rumors, but at the end of the day, I would really take any case serious and consider it at least and see. Right. But the whole finding archaeological digs and stuff in Israel is it's not only suspect, but if it is authentic, it's suspect. That's the hard part because it's a problem. There's just a whole legal law issue with it over there. Anyway,
you can't just go dig anywhere. You have to get a permit. Anyway, Sammy the Sweetheart, thank you for the super chat. It's a long time no see, by the way. I used to see you in my chat all the time. Thanks for coming back. Do you think Jesus had a tomb? Love the shows. That's a good question. We were just talking about this a little bit, but go ahead.
Oh, me? Yeah. Oh, goodness. I don't know.
This lays on the Bart Ehrman scholarship, where he says, this is what he says to me when I talk to him. He went through every single Greek and Latin manuscript that exists to find out what happened to crucified criminals. Guess how many of them went to a tomb?
Zero.
None. Not one person in recorded history went from a cross to a tomb. Now, think about this, though. Jesus isn't even from Jerusalem, doesn't have family in Jerusalem. He's from the north. He's a criminal from an outside city. Mm-hmm. The likelihood of him getting a tomb, this is what he said. The tombs go to royalty. The kings, the high priests, the rich people in Jerusalem get tombs. The poor people, the common people, get get a normal grave, or they get tossed into a ditch in Tartarus.
Right.
So the likelihood of Jesus, a poor wandering ascetic from Nazareth who comes to Jerusalem, winds up getting in trouble, getting crucified. So now he's a criminal in the eyes of I mean, look what they say about him in the Talmud. They don't like him.
Yeah.
The likelihood of him getting a tomb is very unlikely.
I wouldn't worry too much about the Talmud. Even like it's kind of late in the game.
I'm just saying what the Jews feel about it. You can get the
right. I kind of wonder. The reason I say that is I wonder if some of that's potentially anachronistic, because I know in the Talmud sometimes they blame Jesus for the destruction of Jerusalem, which it's like, what? Why? Because the Gospels say he's blaming the Jews for the destruction, but they're blaming him back. Like it's just a kind of blame game. But I think Philo mentions in his writings that there is one person who was a criminal, but they had him taken down, but they had money involved. They like bribed and they had some power. So that's the whole point though. Is like, you don't just get a tomb. You don't just by default get a tomb. Like people get the impression they read the gospel. When you get crucified, you go to a tomb. No, that's not the default. The default is you get buried or get tossed. Right. Like you just said, that person that Philo's writing about, they had money, right? Like you don't just get a tomb by default. No, that's why I think the gospel's trying to have this guy, Joseph of Arimathea, show up. So whether that's historical or not, I don't know.
I'm open to that.
I don't know if there was a tomb or not, to be direct with the question.
Look at his name though. Joseph, what does that mean? The good disciple. Right. A guy named Joseph, the good disciple. Hey,
from the good disciple town.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Bart Ehrman actually said that.
Hey, Mr. Roman soldier, can I have that guy? Thank you. Have a good day.
Right.
No, they're gonna be like, do you want to get on a cross too, motherfucker? Whoops, I didn't mean to swear. But that's what they would say though. He's
talking like he talks to me off air. He felt too comfortable. He got too comfortable.
But seriously, that's a really wild claim for a guy from just come out of nowhere and just be like, yeah, I'm going to take that guy down. I'm going to put him in a tomb.
Right.
Like, they're not calling the shots. The Romans are calling the shots.
He was buried.
And the Romans are a fascist state. They're not going to just let you do what you want. They have to have the power and the might, and they have to make sure everything's an example for the next person.
Right.
Or else people rebel. If they see any weakness, they're going to rebel.
You remember that conversation we had? I was driving home, traveling one night, and we were talking about Acts 17. Okay. And we were talking about Epimenides and the quote that Paul quotes from the Greek poet about in him we move, we breathe, we have our being. And then he's talking about, Cretans, they're liars and such. You showed me the screenshot the other day again.
Callimachus, yeah.
Right. That's where Epimenides got the quote from, I think. So this
is
the Greek.
The other way around. But
it could be.
They both wrote it, yeah.
But it's like 700 BC. I mean, this stuff is like old.
Yes.
And the whole reason he was angry is that they had a tomb for Zeus.
And they said the tomb cannot hold Zeus.
Right. The tomb cannot contain. He's immortal. And they're like, no.
It sounds like Christian theology.
You kind of wonder why the tomb is empty. Like, what's the tomb's role? So if there wasn't a tomb, it's easy to explain this data as theological and significant as demigods or gods. And this is another thing I was getting into, that book I'm reading called Coming Back to Life. I'm trying to interview some of the academics. It's a book. It's free online. Look it up. It's called Coming Back to Life. I'd have to pull up the link. You can email me if you're interested in knowing more about it. Just to point out, hero cults in the Greco-Roman world almost always, I'm not going to say almost always, but very often, more often than not, had tombs associated with them. So I'm learning and opening up this can of worms about heroes and their cults and how they had tombs.
Right.
Is it possible that there was a tomb and there was a real guy and he was temporarily buried, as our friend Tabor talks about? Dr. Tabor mentions he thinks it was a temporary burial because there's the high Sabbath here and they can't keep the body up. Maybe.
Alexander had a tomb on wheels. They had a tomb built on wheels. There was a whole tomb built on wheels that they brought from Babylon. It was supposed to go to Macedonia, but it got intercepted by Ptolemy and brought to Egypt.
Augustus,
some gangster stuff. Like it was crazy, dude. That's a crazy story.
I think Suetonius mentioned this. I could be wrong, but Augustus goes to see the tomb when Augustus went to take out Mark Antony, and they suicided.
He visited the tomb of Alexander. Yeah.
They said, "Do you want to see the tomb of the Ptolemies?" And you know what he said? I don't want to see men.
No, he goes. No, he said, I don't want to see a corpse.
Oh, that's what I mean. Like dead men. Like
he says, I came to see a great king, not a corpse.
That's
But
bro.
the Caesars loved Alexander. They wanted to be the next Alexander. Alexander was the bar. You had to reach that bar, and that's what they want. After Alexander, everything changed. Now you have to be the next Alexander, or you're nothing. But Caesar went to go visit him, and he started weeping. And Cleopatra was like, "Why are you crying?" And I forgot what he says, but like, there's a lot of stories about people visiting the tomb,
right?
And Caligula robbed the tomb and took his shield or something. I forgot what it was, his shield or maybe his breastplate. But they're like, not sure if these stories are true or not, but it like tells you about the personalities of who they're trying to depict, because no one liked Caligula. Like the historians he's a dirty, an evil. So like they say he stole from the tomb, and then Caesars are like going there and like, giving respect. But like, it's funny how they show that always everyone has to visit Alexander. It's like he's the man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, dude. I just thought it was funny. Like, made me think when he said, I don't want to see a corpse, that he's trying to say, like, I don't want to see a mortal.
Right.
Like that's my point when I say that, because this is the whole idea of why the Cretans had a burial tomb for Zeus. They think he had a corpse. And guess what? No, according to the author Epimenides and this other author, no, he's divine. Why is the tomb empty? It's not even a question of, do you think there was a tomb? Why is there an empty one? I think that's the better question. And I think we have good reason in the ancient world to see why these tombs would be empty if they were divine people. So if you're going to say this is a divine or a human becoming divine, or they were always divine, whatever, the tomb could not contain them. That's the point.
Right.
So anyway.
No, that's awesome. So the next question is from Steven Sorensen. Says, did Jesus have a cat? Scholars refuse investigation.
He's joking. He's joking. Yeah. Okay. Steven, he's a good buddy. He's a good dude.
People did have domesticated cats in that period of time too. So I'm not sure about if it was a common thing in Judea, but in Egypt it was. People had cats in Egypt.
Steven, man, thanks for that super chat, bro. Thanks
Constellation Pegasus.
Oh. What's up, brother?
It's our buddy. If Jesus was the most important man to ever live, then why no concrete evidence he existed and the Son of God? Christianity fails in so many ways.
We agree. I mean, we do agree. And this is, so if he's the most important man to ever live, I would beg to differ on him being, obviously, to Christians and to the fact that the influence, especially after the political power in the Roman Empire, it becomes, I mean, it's what shapes the Western world, right? But the kind of Christianity is by then is unrecognizable. I think the first Christians would laugh at 4th century Christians and be like, you say you're like, I'm anachronistically using the term Christian even.
Yeah.
They weren't even Christians. The first people we think of when we call Christian, they were Jews.
Yeah.
So it's like, so it's just, I think
they were Jews following the high priest, Jesus of Nazareth. Like that was their guy. Like that was who we're the followers of Jesus of Nazareth, but they were Jews.
Yeah.
Ultimately, they were following the traditions and all the laws and all that stuff. You know,
I like Constellation's question because it's not even really a jab at historicity or mythicism. It's really one of those things that's saying like, here, Mr. Christian, if your God is all powerful and really wants everyone to really know it's true, why is he not leaving real evidence that actually shows your dude's alive and knows in the 21st century, we're going to be asking these really serious questions, but you can't even leave a lick of real, concrete, actual data that can help us be convinced he is what you say he is.
And if he fed 5,000 people with two fish, 2 people would have found out about that. One is Pliny the Elder, because he wrote about miracles and prodigal births. And Philo definitely would have said something about that, because they would have they lived in that region, those 2 guys.
If he was prominent like that, I think he would.
That's what I'm saying. If he did something that great on a scale that great and had 5,000 witnesses that are going to go around and tell, look what I saw.
Yeah.
But the fact that it doesn't get to Philo and Pliny and the other guys tells me that he wasn't that great. He doesn't say he doesn't exist, but it tells me that he was small. He had a small following. He wasn't doing miracles. He was probably just giving sermons.
Yeah.
That's probably what it was.
I mean, dude, and another thing, dude, even against what I just said about us wanting more hard, concrete evidence, as he said, here's the deal. Jesus wouldn't want to give it to you anyway. Read Mark. They ask for a sign, and he says, only an adulterous generation asks for a sign. Who do you think you are, you sinners? Stop. Right. You know, none will be given to you. And then Matthew adds, but the sign of Jonah. And then it's like Mark can't even give you the sign of Jonah, you know?
But I also think it's a convenient way to tell the reader who's asking, why don't we see any miracles ever? They're planting the seed because they know we're making all these claims that Peter can go around and heal, that Paul can go around and heal, that any of the disciples can just pray in Jesus' name and things will happen. So when it comes to the reader, and the reader's reading this in the 2nd, 3rd century, how come I don't see these miracles? Well, because look what Jesus said. Those who ask for miracles aren't going to get them. Oh, let's explain. Okay, we're all good.
Look, blessed are you who don't see,
right,
yet still believe. Hallelujah.
Exactly. And that's how all religions are set up that way. It's always like, you know, if you don't believe, the ones who don't believe and you're the special one, it's like, oh, just follow me and just wait till you're dead. It's all going to come like, you got to wait till you're dead though.
It is weird. Like, you wonder if the whole concept of apotheosis and putting the gods up there in the sky beyond our reach of vision, you kind of wonder if that's on purpose. Like, you know, there's maybe some psychological to death and losing loved ones and whatnot that plays a role. But also, if you want them to be a god and you really want them to be what you're saying they are, make sure you make them what you want them to make them and then hide them.
Yeah.
So you can say they did whatever you want and then hide them. So they don't, there's no way to show they didn't do what you're saying. So it's unfalsifiable.
This next question is a really good question. I just saw it. Margaret Devellin, thank you for the super chat.
Thank you.
Why was anybody baptizing anyone before Jesus? Now think about this for a second.
Mm-hmm.
If baptism is a Christian thing, why would people be baptized? How does John the Baptist know how to baptize when Christianity is not a thing yet?
So from what I understand, the baptism is not, it obviously is definitely not only a Christian, what we call Christian thing, it's also in mystery cults.
Yeah.
So the water baptism and the cleansing of sins and whatnot, or cleaning oneself, preparing oneself for death. Oftentimes the idea of the water is to die because these mystery.
I'm pretty sure the Zoroastrians had a form of this too.
But I would go so far as to say the Jews, they actually had a concept of washing oneself and purifying oneself. So is it possible the Qumran sect practiced baptism? Each group has different meanings and purposes for their own water cleansing thing.
James, I talked to Tabor about this. They had their bats in their locations.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was part of their
it's
part of the like you had to be a male and they had to give you a scooper for your poop when you go out. That's what they give you. They give you an issue with your scooper for your poop, so you can bury it when you go. But then they had a bath for after you're done. Right. So maybe there's something going on at these baths. But I still think it's an interesting question because the idea of baptizing for salvation sounds like a Christian idea to me.
Yeah, I think for salvation, the way it's described as a Christian idea depends on what you're talking about here. Because mystery cults have salvation.
Yeah.
The Jews typically, when they thought of salvation, it wasn't, from what I understand, it wasn't a individual thing in the same sense.
Right.
So there's something in the Hellenistic influence that's going on at in this time where individuals are the thing. It's not corporate. And just like Ezekiel, when we talk about the sinews and the bones and the flesh and the blood and all that stuff starts to come back together to all these dead bodies in Ezekiel, it's really a symbol for Israel. It's not literally saying each individual body. It gets interpreted as individuals later. The author didn't intend this initially.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what baptism would be. I'm not no expert on this, to be honest with you. But I know it plays different roles in different movements.
Yeah.
That's 100%. All I do know.
Yeah. It was a good question though. Doc Pluro Manat, how's it going, buddy? Stories about the best similar to Jesus simply cannot be seen as credible. But no expert in Judaism and no historian that I've ever read or heard of thinks he was made up. Stories about him were made up. This is sort of what we were getting into, how you don't see, even in the ancient world, even in the 2nd century or 1st century, you don't see people contesting Jesus. And you would think in like Irenaeus and Justin Martyr, who are writing about the heretics and the critics who are responding to people like Celsus, you would think there would be something in there that would be like, oh, you guys don't even think our guy exists? That's crazy. He definitely existed. There isn't any of that. They don't even understand. But I think for Justin Martyr almost sounds like he's answering Mythicism when he says the thing about the Jupiter thing. Mm-hmm. Oh, what you guys believe in is Jupiter is what we believe in is Jesus. And then he says something along the lines of, all these other myths that popped up are because of the demons created it. Mm-hmm, so you sort of sound like it a little bit. There could be a little bit something there with mythicism, but Other than that, I don't see anything. Unless
you can argue from this in multiple angles, and one of those ways is saying, well, just because people didn't argue and say your guy didn't exist, I mean, that wouldn't have been an argument to make if he did in the early times. But being that there's no literature around the time he did exist, if he did,
true.
Like you could work it both ways. Does that make sense? Like one could say, how do you know in 80 AD nobody maybe knows that the guy existed? The only way you would do that is through that whole, well, I was taught, from Peter, and Peter taught so and so, and I was learning from him, and he is my teacher, and we go directly back to Jesus. But those are highly suspect in many cases. I'd be very cautious to believe that anyone really came directly from being taught from Jesus, and this guy was taught from him, and this.
Right.
But it's possible. I think Dennis MacDonald thinks there is something to John, or at least Papias is discussing that he was taught in the Johannine, it seems, school. So that there might be something to that. But the real issue is, like, the Catholics want to say they're coming from Peter.
Right.
And then, the Gnostic
exactly.
come from Paul,
But the Talmud, you would think that the sources like the Tosefta, you would think if there wasn't a guy, you would think they would have, because the Talmud is really has a grip on the history of the Jews. There's a lot in there about Hillel the Elder, who lives in the 1st century BC.
Mm-hmm.
They got people from the 1st century BC, elaborate stuff, a lot of details, a lot of passed down information.
Yeah.
From Israel, they have a good grip on the history of Judea, especially in the 1st century. And if he didn't exist, you would think that they would contest this, and they don't. I'm not saying that it definitely means that's proof. I'm not saying that.
No, I get it.
But I think it's something to consider.
Yeah, it's something to consider, but you could play it the other way too. Is my point. That's all.
I agree.
Thanks for that super chat.
Vaguely Agnostic says, in the 666, by the way. Says, thanks, guys. Are there any writings from the 1st century other than Paul, Julius Caesar wrote in the 1st century BCE? Is there anything from the early 1st century about Jesus, or about Julius Caesar wrote in the 1st century BCE?
This is kind of vaguely.
But other than Paul, you got Clement of Rome.
I was going to say Philo, but if you're talking about Christian, because he said Julius Caesar here, that's Philo obviously writing. There's plenty of Roman authors, but as far as Jews, from what I understand, there's only 2 Jewish authors in the 1st century, Josephus and
other just authors in general.
I don't know the question.
There's hundreds of them.
I was going to say he's being vague.
Yeah, because if you want
his name vaguely,
any author from the 1st century, you can.
He says anything.
You could probably get a list of 100.
Yeah, he just wrote anything, by the way, so that could be anything.
Think about it: Philo, Josephus, Seneca, Pliny the Elder. I can't think of it on the top of my head right now, but there's a lot.
Yeah.
Martial.
Mostly focused on the Greco-Roman world.
Roman authors, Greek.
Yeah.
Greek and Latin. There's a ton of them. But
there's 2 Jewish authors that we know, and then who's the other author we don't have anymore? There was a historian competing with Josephus that we don't have.
Nicholas of Damascus, 1st century. He's a Jew. He wrote the life of Augustus. He wrote a biography about Augustus. That's a 1st century Jewish author that people don't talk about a lot. He's the one who tells the story of the 3 wise men, the 3 rishis he calls of the sect. This is what he says: 3 rishis from India are of the sect of wise men. Well, he says it like this. Let me rephrase it so it doesn't sound. I'm trying to push it, make it sound Christian. I just caught myself. This is what he says. This is what he says. 8 rishis of the sect of wise men were sent by King Porus to go to delegate with Augustus, but only 3 of them made it. The other ones died. So, and then the 3 that made it brought him tigers, oils, and fragrances as presents.
Interesting.
Yeah,
seems like there's a trope. Seems like there's a common trope.
If you're a king, a great king of the world, people come and visit you and give you presents. They sort of, exactly.
Wow. Yeah, so there's a lot there. Thank you for the 666 and being a member.
Yeah. Constellation Pegasus. Wait, this is the second one? Thanks for the super chat. Particle wave duality is easier to research than these poor books written by a god cause mass confusion. Something about that thought.
Look, when we can have so many people write on this and not agree and really be sincere and really legit try, that tells you something I think about this data, like what are we working with?
This next question is crazy. But no, go ahead.
No. Constellation, thank you, man.
Yeah, thank
For
you
real. Thank you.
How is Augustus like Jesus at all? It's from Jesus Saves. Thanks for your super chat. You and I have been getting into this all week. We've been reading Suetonius. Okay, first of all, read Suetonius. Read Suetonius. That's all you really need. If you get Cassius Dio, who writes like books about him, you get Life of Augustus from Nicholas of Damascus, you get Suetonius, you get Plutarch. If you put it all together, you can get you can almost make a mime story of any Messiah figure. You get a what do you call it? An omen at his birth. You want to read that one?
I'm not going to read it. No, they're going to want to watch the videos. I'm not going to waste my time.
Video about it. It's like 2 videos ago on my uploads.
You can get this book for like $5 on Amazon. Literally,
he's got an omen at his birth. What else? I mean, there's a whole.
Well, he has he is like miraculous feats that are going on.
Oh no, here's the big one.
Born by a divine figure.
He's the son of God.
He's the son of God. He's a prince of peace. Legit. Listen, Augustus brought the Pax Romana. Okay, so for centuries there was peace and no civil war in the Roman Empire.
The word prince comes from princeps, and he's the princeps. He's the princeps of the Pax Romana, which means first man of the peace era of Rome.
I would read it just so that anyone who's interested, go and read the deified Augustus in Suetonius' Lives of the Caesars, which is page 43 up to page 98. It goes through a lot of his life as just going through all the struggles of wars and things that happened between him. Mark Antony used to talk crap about him, all sorts of stuff it talks about. Yeah. Then you get towards the latter part of that, and you'll start hearing things, and you go, that sounds similar. I'm not saying it's identical, but very similar.
And when he gets initiated into Lucius, almost like a baptism type of event, because after he gets initiated into the mysteries, they give him the title of Augustus. And Cassius Dio tells us that the title Augustus was only given to gods before Augustus. Caesar Augustus is the first person to get that title. Before him, it was only given to gods. After him,
he gave it to Julius Caesar too, though. But the point, I'm talking about the. Are we talking about the apotheosis here?
Talking about Caesar Augustus. He gets the title Augustus. He's the first one to get this title.
Oh yeah. I'm talking about the fact that they're being worshipped and deified.
Oh yeah. No, but that title Augustus was only given to gods, and it's like a religious title, almost like what you would say for like a Messiah type person.
Right.
I'm not saying it means the same thing.
In the upcoming video you're editing, I actually mentioned the name Augustus and what it means, and pointing out something there. Another thing I want to mention, just one more thing on this super chat. Thank you, Jesus Saves. Hope he's doing well with that. But I would say, is Augustus actually ascends into heaven? Who else does that? He has an apotheosis. He ascends on high. He literally has a birth, right, with a star, just like Jesus. And then he goes off into the heavens with the stars, okay, just like Jesus. So
and here,
look into it, man. Look into it.
One last thing I want to add. When Julius Caesar died, he adopted Octavian in his will. And what he said in the will, he says, I give all my riches and all of everything I own to Octavian if he changes his name to Gaius Julius Caesar. So what happens is Octavian becomes Gaius Julius Caesar, and he does the will of his father, and he avenges his father from the grave. And all of the conspirators, all 300 conspirators, are dead within a year. So the people of Rome saw Julius Caesar die, get apotheosis, and then avenge himself from the grave. Gaius Julius Caesar, who died, kills all of his enemies within a year. So the name of the person is Octavian.
Oh, there's plenty of differences too, by the way, just so he knows. But the interesting part about this whole him being his father, when he went to visit Julius Caesar's grave, this is what we were saying earlier. And one of the Egyptian priests hears him say something. Is it him or was it? I think it was him. And he's like, I avenged my father's death. And the priest said, hold on, rephrase that, because your real father isn't this guy. It's actually a god. Like you are from a God. And this is an interesting thing. Like Jesus' real father. Who's my mother? Who is my brother? Who is my, it's really this guy upstairs who's my father. And you shall call nobody else your father. Augustus did the same thing. And one more note, I'm not going to go into the detail. You got to watch the video. I'm excited for you to finish editing it. But at his birth, the Senate was trying to prevent him because they had a prophecy that that a ruler was going to come, that nature was bringing forth a king that was going to rule Rome and that was going to do this and that. And they were trying to stop. They were going to try and take out the children. Haven't we heard of this slaughter, the massacre of the innocents, if you will, before?
I don't know why I forgot that one. That's the biggest.
I know. It's so. Wait till you see the video that Neal's editing. Me and Neal collabed on this. He's my brother, so you can give him special praise for the edits.
But before the Gospels are written, you have stories about Augustus in the year he was born. The Senate doesn't want any babies to be born or raised because they're afraid there's going to be a king. It's literally almost the same story as the Herod killing the babies.
Yes.
It's crazy.
It's like it's not. Let's not get caught up in zeitgeist.
Right.
The point is, this is not new, baby. This is something floating in. Yes, it is all over the air. You can't breathe without an apotheosis entering your throat. Okay, you cannot go anywhere without seeing this stuff.
Apollos, thank you for the super chat. Would y'all say the myth position, at the very least, has credibility, established intent to fabricate a Jesus?
Trying to understand this.
I'm sorry, credibly. I said credibility. So is credibly established to intent to fabricate a Jesus? Is
it trying to say, and Apollos, help me out here, are you trying to say, would y'all say the myth position, mythicism, at the very least, has credibly established the intent that they're fabricating a Jesus? Yeah. But I think that's exactly also what historicists are saying. So we're on the same team that a Jesus gets fabricated. Guess who else fabricates Augustus? Suetonius. And who knows where he got his fabrications from too. He might have
Alexander the Great and all the other guys.
Right. So there's a fabrication there. Either side we're on. It's the historicist maximalists who believe Jesus actually was what the Gospels say, and they believe the whole 9 yards. So I would say there is credibility to the mythicist position in many ways. I do not discredit that position at all. I say, to me, there's more moving parts. To me, it's more ad hoc, which makes it more complex. And not saying it's not possible. It just seems to me the more probable position is there was a guy they mythologized the hell out of. Anyway, but
Rex Profanus, thank you for the super chat. Says,
thank you, Rex. Appreciate it.
Masked Scholar, more channels and perspectives. It's a shout out. I think it's a shout out to a channel called Masked Scholar, if I'm not mistaken. I think I've heard that before, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the super chat, Rex. Appreciate it.
Let's see what we got. I know there's got to be another one after this.
Look at the emoji. That's pretty cool. I didn't know there was like a half face emoji out there.
Right. There's a lot of comments. Oh, here we go. Our friend. Topic discussed.
Oh, Gary, what's up, man?
Mormon missionaries are at my house. Seriously.
What? Right now?
You should get your phone and record it.
Dude,
set up a tripod and hit your microphone on it or something, and you might make a good video out of it.
Yeah, do what you want, Gary. Gary has a lot of family too. So there's I mean, I would love to see him have a conversation and see how that goes because he's such a polite guy too.
I thought about that. If I had a Jehovah's Witness or someone come to my house today, I would answer the door. I'll talk to him because I love.
He'd be like,
I
gotta go, man. I gotta go. I can't sit here anymore.
They're not gonna like me though. They're gonna be like, whoa, this dude's all over it. He's quoting shit like me. Like.
They will if you listen. So if you're willing to
listen,
to
hear what they say, yeah.
That's why I like conversation. I'll be like, listen, I did this with 2 Mormon missionaries who came to my house. These kids loved me, bro. I'm not making this up. Like, they loved me. I'd get them Mountain Dew and pizza. For whatever reason, there's a loophole. They can drink Mountain Dew, but they can't have coffee or tea. It's weird. But the loophole was they could come and drink Mountain Dew and talk about Joseph Smith's interpretations with me, and then I could tell them my interpretation, and we'd have fun. And then they would make purposeful trips to my neighborhood to come hang out with me. And they were supposed to go do missions in other neighborhoods and stuff. Anyway,
thank you for the super chat, buddy.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate it, man. Go subscribe to Topic Discuss.
I just passed the next one. Oh, here it is. Okay. Aaron Colson. For 1,700 years, Christians have been curating the historicity of Jesus. Do you use the same standard for establishing Jesus that you use for Yahweh?
Same standard you use for Jesus for Yahweh.
Well, I don't think this is historical Yahweh. I mean,
yeah, I definitely don't. I mean, there are people who've argued that Yahweh was once an ancient Near Eastern king in the Middle East somewhere that became deified. But that's euhemerism. At this point, dude, these gods were like celestial, or they're some nature form, or gods of nature type stuff. So I just have a hard time thinking that Yahweh was ever anything other than that. As far as I get the complexity of the historicity of Jesus and Christianity, I get it. They're not arguing for just a historical Jesus. They're arguing for a historical God man who actually did all this stuff. And they're using double standards to do so while ignoring every other account that talks about other men that were doing godlike stuff. So, and I mean, this is just one among you've made me buy like 20 books since I've met you, Neal. You've sent me 5. I mean, like, you make sure I'm reading. Do you use the same standard for establishing Jesus that you use for Yahweh? No.
Yeah, I mean, he's just clearly.
I would look at other examples historically at the same time. I would try to look at.
It's so much older. We're talking about another age. We have the Bronze Age, the Iron Age. We're talking about going back 8. Now we're not going back century. We're not going back to the 1st century.
Right.
We're going back ages ago. So it's not the same,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different because we're outside of recorded history now. They're not even writing stuff down. We're looking for inscriptions at this point.
I mean, like, I think it's fair to say too, like when me and Neal read Suetonius about all these gifts that supposedly Augustus had, it's exciting finding it, but it's also like, we know it didn't happen. We don't believe that happened. We don't believe that Vespasian healed a blind man in a withered hand on a man who had a withered hand he stepped on in a Serapion temple. Yeah. This is in this is in Tacitus. So
I
like,
take all with a grain of salt.
Yeah, take it all like that. And when you do that and you see, man, this is common, the approach I would take with Jesus is like, he's in an area where it's poor, as Neal said before. I mean, other scholars have written on this. So like most people in the world who've existed ever have nothing written about them. I want to repeat that to give you a real emphasis and understanding how, I know this is common sense, but think about it. Most people on planet Earth who have existed, come and gone, have never even been written about, heard of. We don't know a thing about them, but they existed.
Yep.
So I would start somewhere with saying, well, there's other people around this time that exist, but a Galilean Jew who might have tried cleansing a temple at this time, if he had a mention, maybe it's in passing. Maybe it has been whitewashed in Josephus. Possible. Maybe. I don't know. There's so much debate on that particular thing. I don't hinge on it. There's other reasons why I think it was probably a guy. We've been mentioning some of them, but there's all sorts of reasons that I think there was probably a guy.
Getting towards the, I think there's a couple left. We're getting towards the end. Bart Ehrman, thank you, DE, for the super chat. Bart Ehrman's theory falls in one major way. The Phil II Creed shows very high Christology, very early, long before and 70.
Let me get that link. So yes, he believes there is a high Christology there, but he doesn't think it's high Christology like pre-existent logos stuff.
John.
He does not think that. He thinks that this is a demigod.
And here's another thing. Paul's not writing a epic or a narrative like the gospel writers are. He's writing theological treatises that are going to be sort of like, made into this. He is the one, the chosen one, the divine one, the born from the seed of heaven. Whereas Mark is writing the story, is trying to write a story about Jesus.
Can I share my screen, by the way?
Yeah. You just got to go to on the bottom and share screen.
I just want to.
So that's why I think that there's a possibility that Paul almost in some ways sounds like John at some points, but he comes back. He gets. I think he's writing. I think Mark's based off what Paul says. If that makes sense. But
absolutely.
Let me add your screen right now. There you go.
Okay, so this video at the top, I got to echo. I hope they don't hear it anymore. Okay.
You like this?
No, you're good. We could be on the side. Did Paul think Jesus was a pre-existent being in Philippians 2? I would highly suggest anyone who's interested in this topic Go check that video. I know this is a shameless plug, but in this video, Dr. Tabor breaks down Philippians. He's talking in the Greek. He's showing why he says that Paul is seeing Jesus as a second Adam. And when it talks about he did not see fit to be equal with God and that kind of stuff, or to grasp equality with God. In the Greek, the terms grasp and things like that. When you look at the Septuagint, when you look at Genesis in the Septuagint, when you compare these things, he's not saying he's a logos pre-existent coming down deity, but that Jesus did not grasp like the fruit in the garden. Adam is grasping for divinity, or he's grasping equality with God. Like the serpent said, in the day you eat, you will become like God, right? He's grasping for that. He's saying Jesus is not grasping for the fruit. And so he has a completely different Philippians to him in Paul that is not high Christology on the level you see John. It is not on that same level. Now, I would ask to go look at Litwa. Go look at what Litwa. Litwa doesn't agree with that interpretation, but Dr. Tabor does. And then someone else doesn't agree with Litwa or Tabor. It's interesting to get into it, but if your mythicism is hinging on an interpretation here, as he had to have this high Christology, so my Jesus never existed, so he was pre-existent, he was an angel in heaven that came, that is a red flag that I would suggest, just my opinion,
right?
To reevaluate your motives on, like, are you really trying to figure out and grasp what really makes the most sense and what's going on? Or is it better that he didn't exist so I don't have to like worry about anything or something? I don't know.
It's like when you get in Corinthians, and I think it's in Romans, where it says he's born of the seed, born of the flesh, according to the flesh. Born of the seed according to the flesh.
Right.
All right. Some will say, well, the Greek's ambiguous. It's like, it almost sounds like you're trying to make, like it's like you're just going with whatever makes you right. Instead of just being like, yeah, it's possible. He's born of a seed according to the flesh. That sounds like a real birth.
Well, here's the point about that.
At the very least, Paul thought he was real. Maybe you can go at that. I'm just saying.
This is a good point about what you're saying here, right? So the mythicist position is he was born of a flesh in heaven, of the seed of a woman, of the seed of David, right, in heaven, manufactured, right? So he's created, not actually born literally like from the womb of a woman in the literal sense. But then you go, that sounds pretty straightforward and simple, that a guy was born of a woman and they're claiming he had descendancy from David, right? He's going to be in the line of David. Pretty common sense to me, right? But then here's what you have to think about that. It was manufactured, number one. Then number two, where'd this seed of David come from? Well, according to Dr. Carrier, he pointed out that in some Jewish lore, now notice the moving parts that you have to kind of think about and accept as factual in order to come to this conclusion, that in Jewish lore, that God actually saved this, like had almost this sperm bank where there's seed from people like David in heaven. And from that seed that he kept in heaven about David, he created and manufactured the Messiah, Jesus, in heaven, who's like descended down to a certain point, gets crucified somewhere in heaven. I mean, like, there's so much more moving parts.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's easier?
Yeah, it's not, to me, it's not likely. It's possible.
It's possible.
It's possible, but it's just not likely to me.
Yeah.
I
like this next one.
Next one is it's the same person. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Is there a contested Jesus in the New Testament, though? Second,
there is.
Cleverly devised myths. And 3 John. Some believe JC did not come in the flesh. Team myth. Those are good points. I don't think there's any question here.
I could say this: 2 Peter's late in the game. You already have the Gospels that are probably being already jabbed at by people who are saying they're myths, or there are myths in it, right? So cleverly devised myths. What does that doesn't? I used to use this as a mythicist and said, "See, cleverly devised myths," but myths doesn't necessitate everything doesn't exist. I mean, it doesn't mean nothing happened. There is no kernel here. Cleverly devised myths could be, hey, you say lies about this person. You said this guy walked on water. You said this guy did this. He didn't do this. That could be what it meant. 3 John, though, some believe JC did not come in the flesh. This seems to be, for me, very clear. Many academics think this is a jab at Gnostics who are saying Jesus,
yes.
they had such a high Christology at this point. He could not even put on this stuff that we call flesh, because in this Middle Platonism that becomes Neoplatonism, this flesh is nasty, and it's the lowest of the low, and they can't have a Christ in their Christology that ever put on this ucky stuff that we call flesh. Now they're fighting against that and saying, no, he did put on flesh. So there's a philosophy here. And so I wouldn't go so far as to say this is evidence for mythicism. You can use it that way, but now that I've learned there's more ways of understanding this stuff than just mythicism and non-mythicism, you kind of realize, whoa, hold on, what's going on?
Yep. Next one's from our buddy Aaron Adair, who I've done tons of videos and doing more videos with coming up. Thank you for the super chat. Next challenge: who was or was there a historical Buddha? I find it hard to dig into. I need to be better enlightened. I say yes. His name was Gautama Siddhartha, or Siddhartha Gautama, however you pronounce it. I think there was a guy. To me, it sounds very specific. Like, I know that those names mean something. They're all titles and all that. That's how the ancient world was. Everyone's name meant something.
Yeah.
Demetrius means son of Demeter. So I think there was a guy, and I know what's his name points this out, that our friend David Fitzgerald points out that there's some conflicting reports on when he was born. Mm-hmm. Some say they're like in different centuries. I think it's normal. We're talking a long time ago. We're talking about 500 BCE.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to this question, and I would not be the one to be able to enlighten you on this. I am going to eventually explore this more. I do want to make one interesting note that I noticed when I constantly had Dr. Price on MythVision. I noticed that there seems to be this trend for mythicism that, like, when you become a mythicist, you see Jesus may not have existed.
Everyone's a myth.
Notice Buddha didn't exist. Notice he says Muhammad probably didn't exist. Yeah, like everybody doesn't exist now. And you kind of go, okay, what's up? Why is it that almost like all these people didn't exist? And you kind of wonder, is there something behind it? I don't know.
Well, I think they want there to be these people need to write stuff down. Like Muhammad didn't write anything down. That's sketchy. I agree. That is sketchy.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's enough to overturn history to say that he didn't exist. I would need more. I would need some more people contesting Muhammad in Arabia, stuff like that. But as far as Buddha goes, most of the stuff written about him is not true. Obviously, it's just like Jesus. Mm-hmm. He's mostly a myth, but I think he's based off a guy. I
don't know the evidence, so I can't base. I don't know because this is centuries before Jesus too.
And I'm admitting right now, I'm not an expert on Buddha either. I could be so wrong right now.
Right.
Don't take my word for it. That's just my.
If you came to get enlightened, Dr. Adair, the enlightenment we'll give is I plan on doing another episode with you to be enlightened by you, and of course, I hope people will get your book on the Star of Bethlehem, which we just mentioned about Augustus's birth, and then of course Jesus's birth and the star. So yeah, we got more coming with you, my friend.
Absolutely. Abel Chavez. Is it true that some guy, I forgot the archaeologist guy's name, that he found the blood of Jesus in a tunnel where he was crucified and or on top of the Ark of the Covenant?
Whoa.
Only half of the chromosomes.
Please tell me, who is this archaeologist?
Yeah, you might give us a link of where you've heard that from. So I'm going to say no, but thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it.
I wonder if you're joking around a bit though, but
I think it might be.
There are some wild ideas floating around out there. I just don't know about it.
There's so many websites, these .nets and .orgs, where it's just like some guy writing their own ideas.
Yeah,
and like a lot of people don't know how to do research. They didn't go to college. Maybe they got a GED, or maybe they just didn't finish school, and they don't understand that anyone can write anything. Just because they see it on a screen, they'll be like, "Oh, it's real," or on Facebook or something. They don't realize that there's more garbage than not. Yeah. Most of the stuff online is not true. It's all garbage.
That's the problem with today's age.
Yeah, you got to know how to. Wikipedia is great for getting the sources, but if you're just going to look at what it says in Wikipedia, it's not going to steer you right. You got to check who wrote that, what source it comes from, what book it's from, what scholar said it, what primary source it came out of.
That's praise for you. I got to praise you real quick. This is me talking private conversation. A couple weeks ago, I talked to Dr. James Tabor, and he mentioned you, and he said, there's one thing about Neal that I've not found in any non-academic student, someone who didn't go to school and be taught, is that you deal in primary sources. You stick with sources that are primary. And he said that's what he loves about you.
all these behind me, see all those white and black books? All those are Oxford or Penguin, or they're English translations of the original source. So I don't go to the actual primary Greek and Hebrew, which I am trying. I'm working on that. I am trying.
Better than I do. But
I'm learning a little bit of Hebrew and Greek, but for the time being, I'm going with these great. We live in a time where information is abundant. So these Oxford editions are amazing, and I look them up. I read them, and there might be some mistranslations in there. So that's why I go to scholars and I'll ask them, "Hey, look, I read this. Is this a true translation?" Oh, they'll say, "Oh, you know what? The Greek says this. And it means this." And that's how I learn. I do my best to dig into the sources as much as I can, and then I verify these things with people who know how to read the language. That's how I do it.
Yeah. So, thank you, Abel, for that super chat.
How'd you become the king then, Robert Herring?
Listen, just kind of existed, you know. No, I'm just kidding with you.
Oh, look at this. Our other good friend, Discovery.
Oh, Pat.
Yeah. Neal and Derek, this is why you never cross streams.
Right?
That's awesome. I gotta get him back on. We did the Mother Kabbalah. I always say the name wrong. That one was amazing. I really enjoyed that episode. Like, there's we got into so much stuff in a short period of time, and there's so much more to discuss with that. I want to get into like the Thracian and the like the Orphic mysteries. I want to get into all that stuff. I'm working on that. I want to get Pat back on for sure.
Thanks, Pat, and thank you, Robert, for those super chats.
Doc Promenade is back. Neal, that hat is killer. Derek, you look like it's the first day on vacay in Tokyo. You guys are smashing it. Thank you for the super chat, buddy.
Thanks, my friend.
Rex Profanus, have you all read The Scholar on par with Gibbon's Ronald Syme? A shame if not. Another banger for the profane is the populist delusion on elite theory. It's very interesting. I'm going to take a note on this. I'm going to have to come back and look at this and check this out when I get done. But thank you for that.
What is it? So another banger for the profane is the delusion on the elite theory. I'm wondering what the work's about. What's the expert's work about? But thank you for the super chat, Rex.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you, but it sounds like it's awesome. I'll give you that. Rex Profanus says, yes, Mass Scholar is a biblical critical channel.
Okay.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. You don't have to jump in there. Super chat, but you did, and I appreciate it. Yeah, I've heard that name before. I'll definitely check it out. Let's see. I think
it's like a brand new. Oh, there's a couple different ones though. That's.
Is there?
Yeah.
That was the final one. So.
Oh, was it the final one?
Yeah, I know you got to go.
All right, man. Peace. I'm just kidding with you.
But yeah, I just want anything you want to say or anything coming out soon that you want to talk about.
Okay, dude. I always mention this. We're working very hard. We are working together. I'm helping you with thumbnails and ideas. And
I missed one. I'm sorry, I missed one.
Did you?
Yeah, it's the last one is from Mr. Monster, our friend.
Oh, who do
we historically have more evidence for, King Arthur or Jesus?
Good question, honestly.
This is a good question.
Yeah, because they're still wrestling and scratching their heads over King Arthur. Is it this guy? Is it that guy? Or whatever. They're trying to figure out who it was. Yeah. Have more evidence for it? More evidence, I would say, Jesus, if you want to. And what I mean by evidence is probably not a good term. There's just a lot more written about Jesus. But what we're writing about is theology Jesus. So like you're dealing with legend either way. You just got a lot more legend. So who do we historically have more evidence? I don't know. I would ask a historian that question who's delved into this, and they probably might say, I think there's better evidence here or there. But if you ask a different historian, they might have a different opinion. I don't know. That's a great one. Thank you for that super chat.
Yeah, man. Anything else you want to say before we close? I know you got to get going. It's late for you over there.
Yeah, no, I just want to say, first of all, like, I appreciate you, number one. And as much as like I've been a help to you, and I really, I get it. You give me praise and pat on the back and like, dude, if it weren't for you, but Neal, if it weren't for you, bro, if it weren't for what you do and having Gnostic Informant, I wouldn't have ideas that come in all the time the way they do. And there's things like we work together. We're like brothers for real. And we're going to be hanging out in Israel soon. My one request, I always do like a shameless plug, but I say this is like, you are doing this full time now. I am doing this full time now. I have a family with 3 children, a wife. Like, I work very hard. You work very hard. In fact, when you wake up, sometimes you're not even fully awake when you video call me, and your hours are way different than mine.
Yeah.
But you're like, hey, bro, what's up, man? And I'm like,
I always
hey.
wondered if he noticed. I always thought, is he? I wonder if he knows.
I always notice, dude. I always notice. And I just say, like, if you like what you're hearing, we're doing this at the help of an audience. You, the viewer, who are super chatting, becoming members, becoming Patreon fans. You gain access early with him. You can private message him. You can steer the direction of content. Often by becoming a Patreon, you can also come up with scholars and say, hey, I would love to see you interview this academic. Oftentimes we could use your help. If you can reach them, send us, hey, connect us with them. We will look in and do kind of an interview and look and go, hey, I think that's a good scholar. Great. Thank you for being my Patreon member and bringing this to me. But you can steer the channel. Like, there's so many benefits to helping us, and you're making history. So it's not just Neal from Gnostic Informant. It's not just Derek from Mythvision. You are about to train True Gnosis. This is a we thing.
And that's why my outro has your guys' names on it, because you're part of this. You don't understand how much I appreciate every single person that joins my Patreon. I appreciate every single, or members, the YouTube membership. You too. I appreciate all you guys.
Yeah, yeah. And like, while you are about to train True Gnosis, and he's going to say that, we are Mythvision, and it's a group thing. It's a community that takes to do this because we want more people to see this stuff. We love this stuff. And if you're a mythicist and it convinces you, I don't want me nor Neal to be the guys who make you feel like, yeah, you're trying to challenge. But a challenge is good. And if you're a historicist, don't just write off everybody who's a mythicist. I wish we stopped with the whole friction and tried to understand each other better. So that's my words of wisdom. Create friendships, not enemies, and help each other out.
And you have just attained True Gnosis.
You have just attained True Gnosis. The Demiurge has no power over